think he was out for a few days. I'm trying to remember if he even finished the broadcast, but you could tell from his speech and from the look in his eyes that he wasn't doing well. He did have a severe concussion in that.
You didn't pass out from that, though?
No, loss of consciousness is not necessary for concussion. So it doesn't even need to involve contact to the head. One of the first hockey players that I saw following a concussion was cross-checked from behind. So a player took his stick and pushed him in the back. His head snapped forward like that. He had a neck sprain from the injury. So that's what everybody knew about, but what was on the inside is that he had his brain actually hit the other side of his skull in that rapid stop. And that produced a concussion that kept him out of competition for almost the whole season. So that was a really good example of not even needing to have a blow to the head. So moving to the ventral system, the ventral corticospinal tract is depicted here. And the ventral corticospinal tract moves the muscles of the midline of the body. The lateral corticospinal tract, of course, moves the limbs and digits. We have three different brainstem origins of the ventromedial system to complement the cortical origin of the ventromedial system. So we have the tectospinal tract. The tectospinal tract starts in the superior colliculus, and its function is to produce the orienting movements to visual stimuli. We've talked about this a lot. This is the pathway that mediates that visual orienting toward a stimulus in the environment, the tectospinal tract. The vestibulospinal tract, the origin of the information comes from the vestibular system of the semicircular canals in the middle ear, and its function is to maintain posture and balance. And the reticulospinal tract is the third ventromedial system from the brainstem, and it's involved in producing complex organized behaviors and movements. So it comes from many different cell groups in the reticular formation. Again, the name is very helpful in telling you where the origin is, like tecto in the tectum, associated with the superior colliculus, and the termination of the tract is in the spine, spinal cord. Vestibulospinal, vestibular system to the spine, and reticulospinal from the reticular formation to the spine. So the first part of the name tells you the origin, the second part of the name tells you the destination. With the exception of the tectospinal tract, the ventromedial pathways don't cross in the brainstem. Instead, they project bilaterally to medially located interneurons in the intermediate zone of the spinal cord. The axons involved in producing the whole body movement involve a lot of different muscle groups, so the axial or trunk musculature and the proximal musculature toward the midline. And this is again an example of the corticospinal tract. We see that there is crossing a little bit below the level of the medulla out to the motor neurons. So just to kind of talk about another disorder of movement, apraxia is something that we as neuropsychologists see oftentimes. It's referred to as an inability to perform movements when requested to do so. The loss of ability to execute learned, skilled movements. It's not, couldn't be explained by simple sensory or motor deficits. just not wanting to do it, motivational deficits, or intellectual deficits. So an apraxic patient may have difficulty showing how to hammer a nail when asked to do so, but if you give them a hammer and a piece of wood and a nail, they might be perfectly capable of using the object to carry out that task. They just can't execute the movement. It's a very interesting type of circumstance. Apraxia is almost always associated with damage to the left hemisphere. You almost never see apraxia associated with the damage to the right hemisphere. So when I hear somebody has had a left hemisphere stroke, for example, I start worrying whether they might have apraxia. If they have a right hemisphere stroke, I'm less concerned about the risk of apraxia. Right parietal brain damage, though, often produces deficits on tasks involving visual reproduction of designs or drawing things. We call that constructional apraxia oftentimes, but it's not this form of motor deficit apraxia. It's kind of a misnomer. I don't know why we still call this constructional apraxia, because it's not, again, a fundamental apraxia that I've been talking about up to this point. Another type of apraxia is called object apraxia, where the patient uses the wrong object for certain program movements, like brushing a teeth with a comb instead of a toothbrush. Let's see if I can bring that one up. So this is a woman who is experiencing what's called callosal apraxia.
I want you to use your right hand and to show me how to pretend you're blowing out a match.
Okay.
Okay. How about if you wanted to peel the